The Nintendo Switch has been receiving third-party support, the likes of which was inconceivable for the Wii U. And because of this, I've been playing more third-party titles than ever before. From platformers such as A Hat in Time and Celeste to explorative story-based adventures like Rime and To the Moon, some of these lesser-known games have become some of my favorites, rivaling even many AAA titles. In fact, one particular indie title within the Switch's library has managed to sell me on a genre of video games that I had thought for the longest time simply wasn't my thing. Upon its release, The Messenger was the spotlight of many positive reviews which caught my eye, most of which describing the game as a Metroidvania but with a mysterious twist. Metroidvanias, as I alluded to earlier, were not enjoyable to me at this point, perhaps because I'd only ever played Castlevania and Super Metroid, both of which being way too difficult for me, and Hollow Knight, which again was too difficult of an introduction into the genre for my liking. However, being a new game which appeared intriguing enough at its surface, I gave The Messenger a chance despite its genre, and I'm quite glad that I did. What I found as I progressed through the game was not only a newfound enjoyment of Metroidvanias, but also the reason why the title is labeled as a Metroidvania in such an indirect way, and why, upon its release, so many reviewers refused to reveal the game's secret, instead suggesting that their readers purchase the game and discover it themselves. This secret that The Messenger holds not only serves as the title's defining feature, but also contributes to the creation of one of the strangest senses of progression I've encountered in a video game, but simultaneously one of the best. Funnily enough, for the first half of The Messenger, the title's secret remains hidden, and the progression maintains a steady pace. At this point, the game is simply a platformer with controls inspired by Ninja Gaiden and nothing more. As the player progresses through the numerous obstacle and enemy-filled areas present in the first half of the game, progress is defined primarily by the increasing difficulty, players gaining familiarity with the Messenger's controls, and the gaining of numerous upgrades. Many of these upgrades can be optionally purchased, while others are simply acquired as the game goes on, but all of them are very pivotal in creating a steady sense of progression. Firstly, the optional upgrades can range from simply increasing the player's health and defense to gifting them the usage of shurikens, recovery jumps, or mid-air attacks. Of course, a single minor upgrade will do little in making players feel as though they've been powered up, but when many of these abilities are purchased and utilized, their stacked effects can prove to be very potent in helping the Messenger grow into a more complex playable character as more and more areas are traversed. The blue-clad ninja's progression of power is of course aided even more by the aforementioned required upgrades, the first of which are the climbing claws. After becoming acquainted with the game's control scheme in Ninja Village, players will arrive in Autumn Hills and immediately be granted this item, which allows them to scale any wall with ease provided it's not composed of a slick or unstable material. This ability alone makes players feel as though they're far more able than before, being capable of scaling or descending walls without fear, though it's not long before their next major upgrade is encountered, progressing this sense of capability even further. This next item, which takes the form of a wingsuit, is found in the Howling Grotto, and is quite self-explanatory. It allows the protagonist to slowly descend to the ground whenever the speed of his typical fall is too great. This ability not only allows players to feel confidence in their ability to land a jump despite not being able to see the ground beneath them, but can also allow for extremely large distances to be cleared with only a single jump. Combine this item with gusts of wind, which blow the Messenger around, and an upgrade which allows for vertical attacks to be performed while the wingsuit is active, and this ability to glide through the air is made into something which is much more versatile. The final necessary item obtained in this half of the game is the rope dart, acquired at the Searing Crags. At this point, the title's difficulty has been ramped up by quite a bit, and so it's safe to say that any player who's made it this far has become fairly well adjusted to the game's controls. Just as this sense of security sets in, however, a new item arrives in the form of the rope dart to spice up the Messenger's control scheme once more. This simplistic grappling hook allows the protagonist to grip onto certain enemies, walls, rings, or switches and soar towards them. Using this ability in conjunction with the wingsuit and climbing claws, the protagonist's maneuver abilities are pushed to their limit. Learning to effectively use all of these items whilst maintaining control over the Messenger is quite tough, particularly after the implementing of the rope dart. But following countless attempts of trial and error while scaling the Searing Crags and Glacial Peak, the player will finally become comfortable with this last addition to their arsenal just in time for their most difficult challenge yet. the Tower of Time. This glorious gauntlet contains some very threatening room layouts and the toughest boss yet, naturally, as it serves as a test of the player's understanding of the game's mechanics and controls up to that point. If it weren't for the fact that I knew that this game held a major secret prior to playing it, I would have believed that the Tower of Time was the title's final stretch. But it's only after this diamond-coated dungeon that the messenger finally reveals what it's been keeping from its players all this time. At this point in the game, the messenger is yet to show any signs of being a Metroidvania, aside from those present in its upgrade system. Upon surmounting the Tower of Time, however, the title's identity finally begins to change. Within the following areas, the Cloud Ruins and Underworld, thanks to some time manipulation, the game's style advances from its 8-bit pixel art to a second-generational 16-bit style. This is purely a cosmetic change, but it serves as a prelude to a far bigger change that is soon to come. Following completion of the Underworld, the player is placed exactly where they started, back in Ninja Village, except now in the past. This is when the game's nature as a Metroidvania is finally unveiled. Having already familiarized themselves with the title's many areas, now players are given the ability to explore them freely in whichever order they'd like, even being gifted numerous warp zones to help make their traversal more convenient. Of course, exploration is only made worthwhile if the player has an end goal, and in this case, that goal is the collecting of 6 music notes hidden throughout the world. Some of these notes are housed in revisited levels, made more interesting via newly added time rifts, which can lead to secret paths, while others are contained in entirely new levels made accessible due to some of these newly opened pathways. In fact, 5 extra areas, 6 if the music box is included, are opened up following the messenger's transition into a Metroidvania. I called this game's sense of progression strange earlier, and this is exactly why. The pacing of the title switches from having players breeze through areas one after another to requiring them to diligently comb through the entire world in order to find hidden music notes. While wandering aimlessly with little more than a few extremely cryptic hints to use as a guide and oftentimes backtracking to huge extents may seem tedious or boring, it's done in a very welcome way. Traversing through old areas in order to find new ones is extremely fun, especially due to the fact that players re-explore this world with a far greater collection of equipment and upgrades than they had prior, which makes movement much quicker. It's also made less tedious because of the skill level players have acquired at this point. I feel as though half the reason I never got hooked on Metroidvanias before this game was because most of them threw players into a large open-ended world before they were even given much of a chance to experiment with controls. This is no longer an issue to me now, and I credit the messenger for that. This game, rather than abandoning its players in a world before they're even somewhat competent with their abilities, and please don't take that as me talking badly about other Metroidvanias, as I've grown to appreciate some just as much if not more than the messenger recently, instead provides a linear lineup of numerous levels which increase in difficulty as a way for players to become adjusted to and comfortable with the title's controls, and only after they've achieved some degree of confidence does the game release them into its Metroidvania phase. Sure, by using this method, the game's progression fluctuates greatly, but that fluctuation is what allowed me to comfortably enjoy what was my first Metroidvania that I actually completed. The messenger begins as a linear platformer with little more than a few power seals present in terms of optional content. Though somewhat complex in its upgrade system and movement, the game is still nothing more than a side-scrolling platformer at first. But as players gain knowledge, experience, and items, in unison with the increasing difficulty, they'll also grow in skill. Once a new item is mastered, another will be added to the game's inventory until the Tower of Time is completed and players, now ready and able to utilize the rope dart, wingsuit, climbing claws, and any other upgrades they've purchased, are thrown into the Metroidvania they've been trained for, being granted access to wherever they desire to explore next. It's a twist that's expected given the game's genre, and yet one that still caught me off guard. Yes, the pacing slows down rapidly, but given the addition of the Elemental Skylands, Riviere Turquoise, the Sunken Shrine, and the Corrupted Future, as well as all of the new secrets made accessible, the change is more than welcome, and the fact that I had already become acquainted with the controls by the time this change was made allowed me to focus on the beauty of the genre, rather than worry about whether or not the next hit I took would kill me for the 10th time in a row. Ever since I completed The Messenger, I've since played and conquered both Ori titles, Super Metroid, and plan to reattempt certain Metroidvanias that I never quite enjoyed in the past, with Hollow Knight being perhaps the most prominent example. I'll admit that I'm still in a transitional phase, not yet being a particularly avid lover of the genre, but I'm growing to enjoy it more than I'd ever expected, and again, I credit The Messenger for that. Thank you all for watching.